pictures as the Orange Parade makes its way up the Dublin Road, the Bedford Street onto the Dublin Road, and Stephen Grimace is with me now in the studio. We'll just keep these pictures up. Stephen, nationalists and Republicans believe the IUC and the government caved into Orange pressure. What implications has that for the peace process?
Well, the problem is that in terms of what we've been hearing from nationalist politicians, the Irish government, John Bruton, has had what we understand was a very difficult conversation on the telephone with John Major, and that's diplomatic language probably for having a row. Seamus Mallon yesterday said in the House of Commons that, how can you negotiate with a government that can't keep its word? Now, that was clearly an implication. There were implications there for the talks process. I think, though, that when this begins to settle down, there will be a requirement, obviously, to go back into some form of talking, or the whole thing will collapse. And I think that the SDLP all along has been very keen to keep some form of dialogue going. That's been their message when other things have gone wrong. And one would suspect that eventually that they will go back into the talks.
There's been so much talk in the last years of building up mutual trust. Incidents like we've seen this week on both sides, of course, do nothing to improve that, do they?
Well, again, people talk about building up trust, but effectively in the past, well, there's been no real involvement in terms of the two communities really getting together, because effectively, if you look at all that we've had in the last 18 months with talks about talks, that's effectively what they are. There have been a lot of talk about procedures and rules and guidelines, but actually dealing with the substantive issues which are at the heart of this problem, that hasn't begun yet.
Live pictures here, let me remind you, of the Orange Parade on the Dublin Road in Belfast, Dublin Road and Bedford Street, outside the BBC here indeed. Stephen, one last thing, what are the implications for Sir Hugh Annesley?
Well, he's in a very difficult position now. He's already, we know that he's going later this year. The problem is that just about everyone is calling for his resignation. The Alliance Party, the Irish government are deeply unhappy. Even the unionist leaders are deeply unhappy. They argue that he should have taken the decision he took yesterday on Sunday and saved 4 nights of violence and stopped things from getting to this sort of fever pitch.
OK, well, there's a gap coming up in the parade here, and I'll use that opportunity to hand you back to Walter.
Very much indeed, Noel, thank you. Here we are looking down towards the Ulster Hall, past the Ulster Hall, down towards Donegal Square. And with me I have the Orange historian, Dr. Clifford Smith. Clifford, first of all, what would you say about the general mood today? Is it more subdued?
It certainly was more subdued earlier in the morning, but the crowd has been deepening as the time has gone on, and people seem to be becoming a bit more relaxed than they were, say, an hour ago.
Well, we have had a succession of bands passing us here at our observation point, and I must say the turnout is very, very smart, this band passing us now.
Well, one of the great changes that have taken place in the 12th demonstrations of Belfast has been the remarkable improvement in the quality of the music and in the styling and uniforms of the bands. And this results from a distinct effort by the County Grand Lodge of Belfast to improve that quality.
This is the Lark Hall Purple Heroes Band from Scotland, and it underlines another point that a lot of Scottish Orangemen come here, a lot of Scottish bands come here as well.
The Belfast 12th would be entirely different without the tremendous influx of Scottish participant bands, and there's great enthusiasm right across Scotland for those that come over to the demonstration here, and that includes also actual Orange lodges that come over from Scotland. Just at the moment we're picking up on a famous Belfast scene, and that's the great crane at Harlands there, which is carried on Sydenham LOL's banner.
Yes, and of course that represents one of the aspects of the banners which shows a lot of the industries of Northern Ireland.
Well, Orangeism embraces a lot of the working class, and so industrial and craft themes appear on the banners with great regularity.
When we look down the street here and see the panoply of the banners and the bannerets, in fact, in a way, it's a sort of history, isn't it?
It is. The banners convey their own history, and it's the history of ordinary people. We see churches, we see schools, we see buildings, we see politicians, and we also see industry.
What about the tradition of marching? It goes right back to the start, does it?
It goes right back to the start of Orangeism with the early demonstrations remembering the Battle of the Duke Boyne, which actually took place on the 1st of July, not on the 12th of July. We have another shot here of this famous landmark in Belfast now, the great crane at Harland and Wolff.
That raises another point about the banners. How often are new banners brought in with a lodge? They would have a life of, I'm sure, what, 20 years?
Some banners are said to last 20 years. The banners in my own lodge amazingly lasted over 40. But buying a new banner is an extremely expensive item, and a lodge has to work very hard to raise the money to produce one of these great banners.
And we have there William on the white horse. That's an interesting point. Was it a white horse?
I believe that there was a white horse. In fact, I have an old letter from the time when King William arrived at Torbay describing his visit to Exeter, and it said that he brought a white horse with him, so he definitely had a white horse in his retinue. But I'm sure that a prince of that nobility wasn't short of the odd horse or two.
Now, many people refer to King Billy and others to Prince William. Was it king or prince at the time?
That is an excellent question. He was effectively the King of Great Britain at that time, so he's styled King William, the man that crossed the Boyne.
Well, as we look right down Bedford Street there towards Donegal Square, they come round the front of the City Hall, past the Cenotaph. They make their way up through here to the Dublin Road, and the House of Orange is there, isn't it?
The House of Orange is situated on the Dublin Road. At the moment we're watching number 6 district, who've walked across from East Belfast this morning, and it's one of the largest districts in the whole of Belfast and one of the most progressive.
A very smart band here with the pale grey jackets and the dark trousers with the blue stripe on the leg.
And interestingly, you had the banner being carried not by Orange men, but it was actually lashed to the motor car there. So somebody had felt the burden and the heat of the day and decided that the banner had to be carried by the vehicle.
What about the use of cars in the parade? That presumably with the benefit of older Orange men and perhaps the people who are infirm.
Well, there's a tremendous number of people who need motor cars to transport them to the 12th, but the fact of the matter is it does cause problems, logistical problems, in the parade.
Well, we're still looking down there and taking a close-up view of some of those passing by. Number 76 or 76 there. It's quite a colourful spectacle, isn't it? And of course the day is very important in weather terms. If you get a very strong breeze, some of these banners would have great difficulty.
Well, there's always the danger that in stormy conditions the banners will actually rip, and as they're such costly items, great care has to be taken of them.
Clifford, I'm just wondering if you could say something about the membership of the Orange Order today. Is it a working class organisation, or is it across the community?
As far as Orangism in general is concerned, it's right across the community, from the unemployed to the aristocrat, from the professional to the apprentice, but particularly in Belfast it's largely a working class organisation, and so it bears great comparison with the Orange Institution in Glasgow, which is the same social makeup.
Well, in contrast to all the cars in the procession, we have, of course, the horse-drawn carriages, which are still important, and obviously they would have been much more in evidence in the past.
Well, I don't know whether they'd have been as much in evidence in the past, because a lot of the old photographs suggest that there weren't very many of them, but certainly it's a very delightful feature of the parade and much appreciated by the crowd and no doubt by those who are enjoying the ride.
Well, this marks the end of District 6 as they take a short break there, and we're moving on to a combined district, because there are actually 10, numerically 10, but 7 and 8 are combined, so in effect there are 9 districts now.
That's correct. Because of the smaller numbers, it was decided that it would be best to bring about a merger of those two districts, and that has been brought off very, very successfully.
And this lodge, combined, or district I should say, 7 and 8, is the only one, I believe, with its own landau, horse-drawn landau.
Apparently so. I don't recall any others appearing in the parade.
And this is a Scottish band, the Govan Protestant Boys, who have come over from Glasgow. Again, very smart military-style uniforms.
Well, it's being argued that the improvement that we've seen in the orange bands in Belfast is being carried across to Scotland, and there's much more pride being taken in the uniforms and deportment and even the music of these traditional orange bands.
The Johnny Hall Memorial Lodge 1118, founded in 1919, and John Hall, I believe, was a prominent member of Belfast Orange Hall and what was then number 7 district. Sandy Row there is a reference to the Sandy Row Flute Band, again another of the visiting bands, this one from Glasgow.
We're picking up here on one of the great symbols of Orangeism, the Bible on and the crown on the Coote Hill Memorial banner, and that reflects both the British and the Protestant traditions of this institution here in Northern Ireland.
And this is the Coote Memorial Lodge 1921 from North Belfast, and one of the 5 foundation lodges of the district.
That's correct.
St Paul's Church Defenders, the lodge of the current 7/8 District Master Trevor Heron and the District Secretary Clem Heron.
Very often you find that the one lodge will supply a number of the district officers. The district's very often the hub of Orangeism, where all the real work gets done.
This is the pride of the village, another Scottish band from Thornleybank. And St Paul's Church Defenders banner there, just passing in front of our cameras, Lodge 1960. This lodge is just over 100 years old, established in 1892.
There was a tremendous revival of Orangeism in Northern Ireland in the late 19th century, so the age of that lodge reflects that particular event.
Some young supporters there, keeping well fed for the day.
And there's plenty of flasks of coffee available as well for the onlookers.
Northcote Temperance just passing across us there, one of the 5 original lodges in the district. I believe that this was formed a long way away from Northern Ireland in India in 1862.
Yes, there's always been support for Orangeism within elements of the British Army, Ulstermen abroad, and so there have been Orange lodges in Burma and Hong Kong, and the British Empire is reflected in the origins of some of these bands and indeed in some of the paintings on the banners.
Yeah, that was the Rice Memorial Lodge 1985 just passing by. Used to be the William Rice Memorial, but it changed its name to another deceased brother, George Rice, and that brings the winds up District 7 and 8. So
with a very good shot on your screens there of West Belfast Orange Hall, decorated with all its flags, one of the oldest orange halls in Belfast.
And this is the lead into District number 9 of 11 lodges.
Better known as the Shankill District. we're picking up on a changing phenomenon in Orangeism, and that's the increasing number of ladies' lodges that are on parade. This is one of the areas where we're going to see great changes in Orangeism in the future, as increasing numbers of ladies are joining the ranks.
It is actually an old tradition, though it has come and gone over the years, hasn't it?
Well, there has been a Women's Loyal Orange Association of Ireland, but the women have asserted their right to march, and the men have had to step aside and make room for them in the parade.
Do you see something of an amalgamation taking place there?
Well, it's certainly going to be one of the big developments in the nearer future. In fact, there was a women's parade that took place on the Craiger Road just a few weeks ago, and there was a surprisingly high turnout.
The Duke of Manchester Invincibles, which moved to Belfast, I think, from one of the country districts some time ago.
It seems to have come from Kilrea, but that simply reflects the fact that there was so much population movement in from rural Ulster as Belfast expanded as an industrial city in the 19th century. And many of these Orange Lodges came in from the country to Belfast.
The McMullen Memorial on the front, Brother David McMullen. The tradition is, isn't it, that it's only deceased members who appear on banners?
Yes, you have to be dead to have your portrait on the banner.
Clifford, what do you think the world impact, the global impact of recent events is likely to be on Orangeism?
Well, I'm concerned that there will have been a bad image projected across the world. This is part of the frustration and the pain of being an Ulster loyalist, that very often we seem unable to articulate our particular position and our rights in this whole situation of conflict. We're not a population or a community that's particularly skilled in the arts of communication or of explaining our cause. But maybe these scenes of relaxation and celebration will do something to ameliorate that image.
It's always impressive, the length of the procession in Belfast. I don't know whether it's a controversial point. Is it the biggest or not?
That is a controversial point, and I would be undecided on it. It certainly must be one of the biggest Orange demonstrations taking place in Ulster this morning. Of course, what's not generally understood is that the 12th demonstration in Belfast has a character all of its own, and if you were in some of the rural districts, the 12th demonstrations would take on an entirely different colour and aspect.
One thing that's noticeable here this morning is the absence of lambeg drums, and that is something that will still appear in country districts.
There's many lambeg drums in country districts. Generally, there are none in Belfast, for the very simple reason that lambeg drums slow up the procession. To get to Edenderry and meet the time schedules, the Orange men march through Belfast, but in some of the rural areas, the Orange men walk, and they walk behind the lambeg drum.
It occurs to me, Clifford, that if you happen to be marching halfway between two bands, you may well have a lot of problems on the way.
You can end up very, very tired, because your poor old legs won't have known which particular beat of the drum to follow. If you're walking behind a good band, the parade can be delight, but if you happen to be behind a band that's out of rhythm and out of step, the parade can be torture.
And you're covering quite a bit of ground, aren't you? Because it's, 7 miles from Carlisle Circus to Edenderry. That means 7 miles back again later in the day. And of course, there are the lodges who march down to that area. So some would be covering about 18 miles in the day.
They certainly would. It can be quite an exhausting experience. But then, sadly, because of all the difficulties that we've had this week, we're watching brethren, many of whom have been on the march since Monday evening.
This is Ballinafie passing us now, and they, of course, had the difficulties of the decision to be made this morning on the way down the Ormer Road.
That's correct. This is the district that comes down the Ormer Road, and they're just passing us at the moment.
This is number 10 district, with 8 lodges on parade today. And this is the centenary year of district number 10.
That's correct. It's one of the smaller districts in Belfast, but it finds itself at the centre of controversy over the whole routes issue.
Stranmillis Temperance Volunteers. This lodge was founded in 1912. Again, we can see there a reference to the Somme on the 1st of July 1916, 80 years ago this year.
That's right. There's a very important commemorative celebrations at Thiepval this year, and there's a tremendous interest in the whole history of that particular campaign in July of 1916, when the people of Northern Ireland sustained over 5,500 casualties in the first day. We're getting a little taste of traditional Orange music there.
Is that a situation that has been changing over the years? Because some of the bands play Orange tunes, others play hymn tunes, and then there are tunes played from television, popular music too.
That's really a matter of choice for the bands themselves. They decide their musical repertoire. But it really is quite wide in its scope, from traditional Orange music right through to popular tunes, as you say, Walter.
We're just moving from district number 10 at this point to district number 1, and that illustrates that the rotating nature of the order of the procession.
The tradition has been that each district in turn takes it to lead the procession, so that once every decade a district gets the opportunity to lead this great procession here in Belfast.
Well, now, while the parade halts for a moment here in Bedford Street, we can take a look back to the scene earlier this morning before our live transmission began, as the head of the procession made its way through the city centre and approached our camera position. The head of the procession this year, the Chief Marshal Harry Fletcher, the Deputy Chief Marshal Samuel Devlin, and the officer in charge of the Colour Party, Dawson Bailey.
The procession is led by the Miller Memorial Band, and we're just getting a view there of David Trimble, the Unionist Party leader, who played such a pivotal role in events over the last 5 or 6 days.
And of course, he's a guest speaker today.
He is the guest speaker at the Eden Dairy demonstration. So he's left County Armagh, and he's accompanied in the procession. We can just see him there with the beard and the bowler hat, the new Grand Master of the Grand Orange Lodge of Scotland, Ian Wilson.
Now, the County Grand Lodge colour party carries the Harry Burge Memorial colours. Can you tell me, that incidentally I should say is the Queen's colour, the sword bearers, that's the Union Jack with Imperial Crown, the orange county flag and the purple county flag, the orange flag modelled on the original orange flag carried at the Boyne.
That's correct. The orange colours were carried at the Boyne, and they're represented in the flags of Belfast County this morning. One feature of the head of the procession of Belfast this morning is that there aren't actually very many overseas visitors in the local county procession.
David Triple again there, by the way, just passing us. You mentioned Ian Wilson, who was recently elected Grand Master of Scotland. There are other important Scottish visitors like Jack Ramsay, who's the Grand Secretary of Scotland, and a number of other guests from Glasgow and Central Scotland.
Well, that reminds us of these very, very close links between Orangeism in Ulster and Orangeism in Scotland. In fact, Orangeism in Scotland, in many respects, can be more progressive than Ulster Orangeism. This is seen, for example, in the way in which they have integrated the women's movement into the structures of Orangeism in Scotland, and it'll be interesting to see whether the Ulster Orange men do the same thing in the future.
Well, District number 5, Sandy Row District, and quite interesting that Sandy Row has been a main thoroughfare for some considerable time, 400 years, and the name in fact owes something to its origins, doesn't it?
That's right. The name was given because of the build-up of sand at the high tide mark due to the ebb and flow of the tide.
Now, there's one of the women's lodges, and of course we're looking back to the head of the procession. We've already been commenting on the fact that there are more orange women in the parade this year.
That's correct.
This banner shows the Ulster Convention, which was signed in 1912. And the City Hall in the background of that banner actually was a 6-year-old City Hall. It had just been built in 1906.
We're just picking up on the edge of our screen there one of the bannerets that are carried. Some of the lodges that are few in number find it easier and less expensive to buy 2 standards, 2 flags and a banneret, and of course they're much easier to manage than the much heavier and much more expensive orange banners.
Fellowship Temperance, again quite a considerable number of temperance lodges in the procession.
Well, the whole notion of temperance points back to this revival of Orangeism that was enjoyed in the 19th century, when at the same time the temperance movement was also very strong.
Again, for numerical reasons, presumably two lodges combined if they're low in numbers?
That happens sometimes, and it's actually demonstrated in the parade this morning, where there are lodges that have combined because the numbers are small.
More visitors. This time we've mentioned Glasgow several times. We shouldn't forget Edinburgh.
No, Edinburgh isn't as strong as far as Orangeism is concerned as Glasgow, but there's a very powerful support for the Belfast demonstration from Edinburgh brethren who come over every year.
Fellowship Temperance 680, as I said, marching with King's Hall Defenders, Lodge 1298.
We're getting a rear view there of yet another lodge that has adopted the tactic of fixing their banner to the car, which takes all the weight and all the stress off the backs of the brethren.
Bit of clever engineering.
We're picking up on the centre of our screen the portrait of William Bridget, a famous maker of orange regalia and orange banners. And in fact, in my collection of orange memorabilia, I have an old catalogue that was produced at the turn of the century showing many of the banner styles. And you'll note that many of these banners follow particular well-established and traditional patterns.
The banners themselves are made of silk, aren't they? But they have an edging of linen, which means that they can be affixed to a frame.
That's right. The silk is brought in sometimes from Switzerland, and it's a coarse silk, and it's given undercoats of paint, and then they start building up the design and the pattern over a period of time. The longer the banner has to dry as it's painted, the better for the strength and quality of the banner.
Now there's King Edward on a brown horse, this with Lodge 733, the King Edward VII Memorial Temperance Lodge. Just wondering, number of paradoxes in that I believe this lodge was founded in 1891, but that was in the Victorian era.
Yes, but lodges often are founded and then decided to change their name to take note of a particular historical event or character.
St Nicholas's Church, Temperance Lodge, founded in 1908, just moving out of our picture there. That's St Nicholas's Parish Church on the Lisburn Road in Belfast. Just coming into picture again here. Are the banners hand-painted?
Yes, they are hand-painted, and I had the thrill a couple of years ago of being up in South Londonderry at the unfurling of an orange banner that had been painted by a young man of only 23 years of age. So the skills of the banner painter are being handed down through the generations.
He's a very young man. He's going to be a drum major in due course, is he? Fully fledged.
Yes, I wonder if he'll make it to Etonderry this morning.
That's right. It's a very long walk for a young man of his age.
Here's Oma Protestant Boys filling the screen, a very famous band from County Tyrone, shown great improvement in their musical skills and in their deportment. But sadly, as part of our history, they came across the soldiers who'd been bombed at Ballygawley and were called upon to give first aid at that terrible tragedy.
They probably saved a number of lives by their presence there. Do you think that the cost of running a band has had an effect on the types of bands in the profession? Maybe less military-style bands today?
No, in fact, there's been an increase in military-style uniforms. What we do notice in Belfast is the absence of both pipe bands and silver or brass bands. They seem to appear much more often in the rural demonstrations, and one of the reasons for the lack of pipe bands and the lack of silver bands is actually the distance of the walk and the weight of the instruments that have to be carried or blown. So that's disappointing for those who are pipe band enthusiasts or prefer the sound of the silver band.
Yes, important to have enough puff to reach the field, and if you're playing instruments most of the way there, that's a factor to be taken into consideration.
Well, I don't know why it is, because if you listen to the Gurkhas pipe band, they certainly move on at a great pace, but a lot of our Ulster pipe bands can be very slow when they're marching.
Quite a few skills involved in the work of the drum majors, and of course I always think when I look down streets like this that not so very long ago you'd have had tram wires or trolleybus wires overhead.
You and I are giving our age away, Walter, with
so.
that, but certainly they can show great skill with the mace at times, and they can get tremendous heights with the pole as they toss it up. Another view of this famous orange character, William Bridget, who made such a contribution to the development of regalia and to banner painting. It's said, Walter, that the Bridget family were so grateful to the Orange Lodge that named themselves after the late William Bridget that they made a special banner for them, which was slightly bigger than all the rest.
Pride of place for them.
We have another Scottish band coming into shot here. One of Scotland's famous accordion bands. In Belfast, most accordion bands are button accordion bands, but the Scottish accordion bands are invariably piano accordion bands, which are the piano accordion being that bit more expensive. There's another close-up of the traditional orange standard that has come down to us through history right from the 17th century. Another Scottish piano accordion band coming into view right now.
Well, if they're on time, it's the Queen Elizabeth band. Richview Church, total absence 1038, with Richview Presbyterian Church on Donegal Road, and King George VI on the reverse of that banner. Here's a banner which has an orange arch. It's a Sandy Road True Blues. Now, where do the arches come from? What about that tradition?
Well, that's a tradition that many Orange people are actually quite confused and mystified by. Some people think that the arches are borrowed out of Freemasonry, because we know that there are a lot of Freemasons involved in the early days of Orangism. But the reality is that the orange arch comes from Orange in the south of France. Comes from the Arc de Triomphe there, which was in King William's back garden, as it were, in the old days. A very good shot of Sandy Row Orange Arch on that particular banner. So it's a tradition that reaches right back to Provence in southern France. But there's very few people know that, Walter.
Well, a little bit of education today, then. Coleman Memorial, founded in 1952, and they have a new banner this year. Could you tell me why that is?
Well, each lodge sets itself a target and raises money to re-equip itself with a banner when the time comes round. But one of the reasons was to remember the Ulster Defence Regiment, which is on the reverse side. Another view of this very important symbol of Orangeism, the Bible and the Crown, linking both the Britishness and the Protestantism of the folk on parade.
Just to remind you that we're watching the earlier part of the parade, which began and started to come past us here in Bedford Street before we went live on the air. Do you have to go into training for a walk if you're not a walker usually?
No, I think the folk just get up and have their soda bread and cup of tea and set out and hope that they arrive safely and return safely.
Bright colours are obviously very popular.
Yes, although most of the brethren in Belfast wear the famous orange collarette, the sash and the collarette actually emerged at the same time. Sashes have become increasingly popular, although we haven't seen many of them identified this morning. Looking down Bedford Street towards the Ulster Hall there. Latimer and Ridley, the famous Reformation martyrs from England, on that particular banner.
Well, now we're back again live because the bands and the lodges take a rest at this point. They've just resumed their march on their way to Eton-Derry. Like Royal Marines, this uniform, isn't it? With the
Yes, this is a band from Kilkeel, so obviously the sounds of the waves has got to them. They look very much like Royal Marines, very, very well turned out and very smart. The young man from Scotland on parade.
If I can just interrupt you there, because we're coming to the end of our time, Clifford. Here we are on this 12th. It's been a momentous week for Orangeism. We're going to leave our coverage of this year's 12th procession as it makes its way through central Belfast on its way to the field at Eton-Derry. There will, of course, be full reports of the day and all our bulletins throughout the day, and in Newsline the 12th at 10 o'clock on BBC One, Northern Ireland.
Your commentators for today's 12th celebration coverage were Walter Love and Dr. Clifford Smith. And as Walter said, you can see highlights of today's parades this evening on BBC One Northern Ireland at 10 o'clock.